Step away from that Rolls-Royce before I have you arrested. Claire Whitmore's voice cut across the underground parking garage like the snap of a cold wire. The word struck just as Marcus Bennett slid the key into the door of the black Rolls-Royce Ghost parked beneath the executive sign at Whitmore Logistics Tower. For 1 second, the entire garage seemed to stop breathing. A man in a gray suit paused beside the elevator. 2 assistants carrying laptop bags slowed near a row of reserved spaces. Somewhere above them, rainwater hissed down the ramp from the street, carrying the smell of wet concrete, gasoline, and expensive perfume from the lobby vents. Marcus turned slowly, one hand still resting near the door handle, the other holding a paper coffee bag from a diner 3 blocks away. He was dressed simply in a dark jacket, clean jeans, and polished brown shoes that were nice, but not loud. His short curls were neatly cut, his face calm, his eyes steady in a way that made the accusation feel even louder. Claire stood 20 feet away in a cream blazer, her short chestnut hair tucked behind one ear, her company badge shining against her blouse. Her phone was already in her hand. Her thumb hovered over the screen like she had made her decision before he ever spoke. "Ma'am," Marcus said, his voice low and even, "this car belongs to me." A few people looked at the Rolls-Royce, then back at him, then at Claire, as if the machine itself had more right to be believed than the man holding its key. Claire gave a tight laugh with no warmth in it. "That vehicle is registered to the executive level," she said. "This is private property. You cannot just walk in here and touch whatever looks expensive." Marcus glanced up at the sign above the parking space. "Executive parking. Reserved. Level B2. The letters were clean, silver, and cold beneath the fluorescent lights. He had chosen this entrance on purpose that morning. No driver. No security detail. No announcement. He wanted to see the company as it really was before anyone polished it for him. He wanted to know what kind of place Whitmore Logistics became when no one knew the owner was watching. Claire took another step forward. "I am calling the police." The sentence did not shake Marcus, but it changed the air around him. Someone behind Claire whispered, "Is she serious?" Another person lifted a phone, not openly, but just enough for the camera to catch the moment. Marcus noticed. He noticed everything. The angle of the phone. The security guard near the stairwell pretending to look away. The woman near the elevator staring at his hands instead of his face. He had seen that stare before in jewelry stores, hotel lobbies, gated neighborhoods, even outside restaurants where he had already paid for the reservation. It was the old American question dressed in new clothes. "How did you get here? Who let you in? What are you doing with something we decided could not be yours?" Claire pressed the phone to her ear. "Yes, I need officers at Whitmore Logistics Tower, lower garage, level B2, she said, her voice becoming sharp and official. "There is a man attempting to steal a Rolls-Royce from the executive parking area." Marcus's jaw tightened once, barely. He looked through the windshield at the cream leather seats, the folded acquisition documents on the passenger side, and the small silver pin his father had given him the day he opened his first warehouse. His father had not lived long enough to see him buy a company like this. But Marcus could hear him anyway. "Son, never let a small room make your soul smaller." "Tell them I will wait," Marcus said. Claire lowered the phone slightly, surprised by the calmness. "Excuse me." Marcus placed the coffee bag gently on the roof of the car, then held the key out where everyone could see it. The Rolls-Royce lights blinked softly, amber against black paint. The sound was quiet, almost polite, but it rolled through the garage like truth clearing its throat. Still, Claire did not move. She looked at the key, then at Marcus, and something stubborn hardened in her face. "Keys can be stolen," she said. The people watching fell silent. Even the rain at the ramp seemed farther away now. Marcus studied her for a moment, not with anger, not even with shock, but with a tired kind of sadness that made Claire's confidence flicker for half a breath. "What made you decide I did not belong here?" he asked. The question landed heavier than an argument. Claire opened her mouth, but no answer came out quickly enough to save her. The elevator behind her chimed. More employees stepped into the garage and froze when they saw the scene. The black man beside the Rolls-Royce, the white woman with the phone, the gathering witnesses, and the luxury car reflecting all of them in its perfect dark paint. Marcus slipped the key back into his pocket and waited under the white garage lights, calm as stone, while Claire kept the police on the line, and the morning began to turn into something neither of them could undo. Marcus Bennett did not move from beside the Rolls-Royce. He stood with his shoulders relaxed, his coffee cooling on the roof, and his reflection stretched across the black paint like a man split between two worlds. Above him, the fluorescent lights buzzed faintly. Around him, the witnesses kept pretending not to stare while watching every breath he took. Claire remained near the concrete pillar, phone pressed close, speaking in a lower voice now, as if the calm in Marcus had made her louder accusation feel too large for the space. He could have ended it with one call. He could have asked the board to come downstairs. He could have opened the leather folder on the passenger seat and shown them the signed acquisition papers that made him the new owner of Whitmore Logistics. But Marcus had spent his whole life learning that power revealed very little when it arrived wearing a crown. Truth showed more when it walked in quietly and waited to see who would make room. He had grown up on the west side of Detroit in a narrow brick house where winter wind slipped under the doors and every dollar had a job before it reached the kitchen table. His mother, Loretta Bennett, worked the early shift at a hospital cafeteria and the late shift cleaning offices downtown. His father, James, drove freight for a regional carrier until his knees gave out after 20 years of climbing in and out of truck cabs across Michigan, Ohio, and Indiana. Marcus learned numbers from delivery slips, discipline from unpaid bills, and dignity from parents who never let hardship turn them cruel. At 14, he washed cars behind a dealership for cash. At 16, he was loading pallets after school. At 19, he was taking night classes in supply chain management, sitting in the back row with steel dust still caught under his fingernails. Nobody handed him a door. He studied the hinges until he knew how to build one. By 27, he owned 3 delivery trucks. By 31, he had warehouses in 4 states. By 34, investors who once mispronounced his name were asking him how quickly he could rescue failing companies. Still, Marcus never dressed like a man trying to prove he had arrived. He bought good shoes because his father told him a man should respect the ground he walked on. He drove the Rolls-Royce because his mother had once paused outside a hotel in Chicago, looked at one gliding past, and whispered, "One day, baby, you will sit somewhere nobody can ask you to leave." After she passed, Marcus bought the car not to impress strangers, but to remember her face in that hotel window, lit by traffic and impossible hope. That morning was supposed to be quiet. He had flown in before sunrise, picked up the car from private storage, and stopped at a small diner for black coffee and a turkey biscuit wrapped in paper. No press release. No arrival ceremony. The acquisition had closed at 11:42 the night before, after 6 months of negotiations and a final signature sent from a law office in Chicago. Whitmore Logistics had been bleeding contracts, losing drivers, and hiding behind polished marble while the people on the loading docks carried the company on tired backs. Marcus wanted to walk through the building before the executives performed for him. He wanted to see whether the receptionists smiled at couriers, whether security greeted janitors, whether managers knew the names of the people who kept the lights on. Then Claire saw him by the car, and the building answered faster than any report could. A young employee near the elevator shifted his weight, eyes flicking from Marcus to Claire, then down to his badge. He looked like he wanted to speak, but had been trained by the air itself to stay quiet. Marcus noticed him too. He noticed the shame before the courage. That was something else he had learned young. Silence was rarely empty. Sometimes it was fear wearing a company logo. Claire ended the call and straightened her blazer. "Officers are on the way," she said. Marcus nodded once. "Then we will let the facts arrive with them." His voice was steady, but inside, something old and familiar pressed against his ribs. Not anger, not surprise. A tired ache, the kind that came from being measured before being met. He looked at the executive elevator, the polished doors reflecting Claire on one side and himself on the other, both distorted by the curve of the metal. Somewhere above them waited a conference room full of people expecting Marcus Bennett, the new chairman, the man whose signature had changed their futures overnight. Down here, under the cold lights, he was still just a black man beside an expensive car, waiting for strangers to decide whether he belonged. Claire Whitmore had always believed order was the same thing as goodness. That belief followed her through the polished halls of Whitmore Logistics like the click of her heels on marble, sharp, steady, and certain. She was 29, young for the authority she carried, with short chestnut haircut just below her jaw and a face that could turn warm in meetings, but harden instantly when something threatened the image of control. Her grandfather had founded a small regional trucking company in the 1980s, and by the time Claire was old enough to understand the family name, Whitmore no longer meant trucks, fuel, and tired drivers. It meant glass towers, executive elevators, private parking, and people who smiled when they saw her badge. She had not inherited the company, not exactly. Her father's bad deals and the board's quiet panic had made sure of that. But she had inherited the attitude that the building was still partly hers, even after the sale, even after the lawyers stopped using the word family and started using the word transition. As operations manager, Claire knew every access point, every parking pass, every visitor policy, every security code from the lobby to the roof terrace. She could tell when a courier used the wrong entrance. She could spot a temp worker who had wandered past the service hallway. She knew which executives drove German sedans, which board members preferred black sport utility vehicles, and which reserved spaces were never to be questioned. That knowledge made her valuable. It also made her dangerous, though she would never have called it that. In her mind, she was careful, professional, protective. A woman keeping chaos from slipping through the doors of a company already bruised by rumors of acquisition and layoffs. She did not think of herself as cruel. Cruel people, she believed, shouted slurs or slammed doors or laughed when someone was embarrassed. Claire did none of that. She donated to school drives. She smiled at receptionists. She thanked the janitorial staff when someone else was watching. Her prejudice were nicer clothes. It sounded like policy. It sounded like concern. It sounded like, this area is restricted. Now, standing under the white lights of Level B2, she felt the eyes of employees gathering around her, and instead of doubt softening her, it made her posture even straighter. The man beside the Rolls-Royce was too calm, and that bothered her more than if he had argued. He did not plead. He did not apologize. He did not scramble to explain himself in the nervous way people often did when they had been caught where they did not belong. He simply waited, as if the building owed him patience. Claire looked at the car again. Black paint, cream leather, executive plates, a windshield so clean it reflected the garage lights in perfect white bars. It looked like money that had never been questioned. Then she looked at Marcus. Dark jacket, coffee bag, clean jeans, brown shoes. No driver. No badge visible. No assistant rushing behind him with a tablet. To Claire, the mismatch felt like evidence. She did not hear the arrogance inside that thought. She only heard her own heartbeat climbing. Security should have stopped you at the entrance, she said, more to regain control than to gather facts. Marcus turned his head slightly toward the security guard by the stairwell. The guard's face tightened. He did not stop me because I used my access card, Marcus said. Claire's eyes narrowed. Then I would like to see it. You will, Marcus replied. When the officers arrive, I will show them everything at once. That answer irritated her. It sounded too much like someone setting the terms. You do not get to decide procedure here, she said. A faint murmur moved through the small crowd. The young employee near the elevator, a junior analyst named Ryan, swallowed hard. He had seen Marcus Bennett's photograph in the confidential acquisition packet at 6:15 that morning. Not clearly, not long enough to be completely sure, but enough for unease to crawl up his neck. The short curls, the steady eyes, the name that had appeared on the transfer documents now locked in the executive legal drive. He looked from Claire to Marcus and opened his mouth, then closed it again when Claire's gaze swept across him. Marcus noticed. Claire noticed too, but misunderstood the silence as support. That was the problem with power. It often mistook fear for agreement. She stepped closer to the Rolls-Royce, careful not to touch it, and lowered her voice. People work hard to keep this company safe, she said. We have had theft attempts before. We cannot let anyone walk in from the street and claim whatever they want. Marcus nodded slowly, as if he had finally heard the sentence beneath the sentence. Anyone, he repeated. The single word made Claire's face flush. That is not what I meant. Then say what you meant. The garage went still again. No one breathed loudly. No one wanted their name attached to the moment forming in front of them. Claire looked at Marcus, and for the first time, uncertainty pressed against the edge of her certainty. But before it could become honesty, a sound rolled down the ramp from the street above. Tires on wet concrete. Doors closing. Radio static. The police had arrived. The officers entered the garage with rain still shining on their jackets, their boots leaving dark half-moons on the concrete floor. One was a middle-aged man with a tired face and careful eyes. The other was younger, already scanning the crowd, the car. Claire, then Marcus. Radio static crackled once and died into the hum of the fluorescent lights. Claire stepped toward them quickly, her phone still in hand, relief loosening her shoulders as if authority had arrived to confirm the story she had already written. "Officers, thank you for coming," she said. "This man was attempting to access a vehicle in executive parking. He does not belong in this area." Marcus did not interrupt. He did not lift his voice. He simply turned fully toward the officers, keeping his hands visible at his sides, not because he had done anything wrong, but because experience had taught him that innocence did not always protect a black man from fear. The older officer looked at him. "Sir, is this your vehicle?" Marcus nodded. "Yes, officer." Claire exhaled sharply, almost laughing again. "He keeps saying that." Marcus reached slowly into his jacket pocket and pulled out his wallet with 2 fingers. "I have my identification, registration, proof of insurance, building access credentials, and the purchase documents for the company upstairs." The words were calm, but they shifted the room. The younger officer blinked. Claire's expression tightened. "Purchase documents?" she repeated. Marcus looked at her, then back at the officers. "All in order. I am happy to provide them." He handed over his driver's license first, then the registration card. The older officer took them and looked down. His eyes moved from the card to Marcus, then to the Rolls-Royce. The name matched. The silence after that was small, but sharp. Claire noticed it and rushed to fill it. Keys and paperwork can be misleading. We have had issues with unauthorized access before. This is a sensitive property. Marcus turned slightly, just enough to face her without making the officers feel ignored. "You called the police before asking for my name." Claire's mouth opened, then closed. "You were standing beside an executive vehicle." "I was standing beside my vehicle." His voice stayed low. That made it worse for her. Anger would have given her something to push against. His patience gave her only herself. The older officer handed the registration to his partner. "The vehicle is registered to Marcus Bennett." A murmur moved through the employees. Someone near the elevator whispered his name as if recognizing it too late. Ryan, the junior analyst, looked up with his face drained of color. He took 1 step forward, then stopped again. Marcus saw him hesitate. This time, he did not let the silence protect the wrong person. "Young man," Marcus said gently, without looking away from Claire. "You saw something on the acquisition file this morning, did you not?" Every eye turned to Ryan. He swallowed. His badge trembled slightly against his shirt. Claire shot him a warning look, not cruel enough to be obvious, but clear enough to be understood by anyone who had ever worked under someone afraid of being embarrassed. Ryan's voice came out thin. "I saw an internal packet." He cleared his throat. "The new ownership packet." Claire went still. "Ryan, I am sorry," he said, barely above a whisper. "But I think this is him." The garage seemed to tilt. The younger officer looked from Ryan to Marcus. "Sir, what company did you say you purchased?" Marcus picked up the coffee bag from the roof of the car and set it carefully on the hood, away from the rainwater dripping from the ceiling pipe. "Whitmore Logistics," he said. The name did not come out like a boast. It came out like a fact that had been patient long enough. Claire's face changed in pieces. First confusion, then resistance, then something colder, deeper, almost fear. "That is impossible," she said. "The buyer was represented through Bennett Capital Group." Marcus nodded. "That is my company." No one spoke. The older officer handed Marcus back his license more respectfully than he had taken it. "Mr. Bennett, it appears the vehicle is yours." "It always was," Marcus said. Then he turned to Claire. His eyes were not cruel. That was what made her look away first. "But the car is not the part that matters." He reached into the Rolls-Royce through the open door and took out a leather folder from the passenger seat. The cream interior glowed softly under the garage lights. He opened the folder and removed a single page bearing the company's seal, the acquisition confirmation, and his signature at the bottom. He did not wave it. He did not shove it toward anyone. He held it still, letting truth stand without performance. "I came here to see how this company treats people when it does not know who they are," he said. "Now I know." The words settled over the concrete, the car, the witnesses, and Claire Whitmore's pale, silent face. Above them, the executive elevator chimed again, and this time the doors opened to a group of people who had been waiting upstairs for the man standing in the garage. The people stepping out of the executive elevator did not move at first. They stood beneath the silver doors with the stunned stillness of people who had rehearsed a welcome speech upstairs and walked into a judgment downstairs. Leonard Price, the interim chief executive officer, recognized Marcus first. His face lost its color so quickly that even Claire noticed. Beside him stood Dana Morales from legal, Thomas Greer from finance, and two board members with visitor badges still clipped neatly to their jackets. They had expected to greet Marcus Bennett in the top-floor conference room with coffee, polished smiles, and a view of the city. Instead, they found him beside his own Rolls Royce, surrounded by police officers, employees, security guards, and the woman who had called him a thief without ever learning his name. "Mr. Bennett," Leonard said, his voice cracking at the edges. "We were told you had not arrived yet." Marcus looked at him for a long second. "I arrived 20 minutes ago." The answer was quiet, but it made Leonard flinch as if the words had weight. Dana Morales stepped forward, her eyes moving over the officers, Claire, the crowd, the open folder in Marcus's hand. "There seems to have been a serious misunderstanding," she said carefully. Marcus turned toward her. Which part was misunderstood? No one answered. The older officer shifted his stance, uncomfortable now that the situation had become larger than a vehicle report. The younger officer checked the registration again, as if paper could help him disappear from the center of a corporate disaster. Claire stood rigid near the pillar, her phone lowered at her side, the screen dark. She looked smaller than she had 10 minutes earlier, but not yet sorry. Not fully. Shame had reached her face, but pride still held her spine straight. Leonard tried to recover. "Mr. Bennett, I apologize for the inconvenience. Our security procedures are very strict during the ownership transition." Miss Whitmore was likely acting out of caution. Marcus's eyes moved to Claire. "Is that what this was?" Claire swallowed. The garage waited with her. The employees who had watched in silence now watched harder, because everyone understood that this was the moment where a person either told the truth or hid behind policy. "I saw someone accessing an executive vehicle," Claire said. Her voice was thin but controlled. "I did not recognize him." Marcus nodded once. "You did not ask my name." She looked away. The situation looked suspicious. "Because of the car?" he asked. "Because of the garage?" His voice stayed even. "Or because of me?" The question did not echo, but it seemed to touch every wall. Claire opened her mouth, and for a moment nothing came out. Then she said the words that changed the air completely. "You did not look like someone who owned it." The silence that followed was deeper than shock. It was recognition. Several employees looked down. Ryan closed his eyes briefly. Leonard's jaw tightened, not in defense of Marcus, but in terror of what that sentence might cost the company. Dana Morales inhaled slowly through her nose. The officers exchanged a glance. Claire heard herself after the words were already alive, and her face shifted from control to panic. "I mean, that is not what I meant." Marcus did not rescue her from the sentence. He let it stand there, in the cold white light, exactly as she had built it. "But that is what you said," he replied. His calmness was not soft anymore. It was precise. Claire's eyes grew wet, but no one moved toward her. This was not the kind of pain someone else could clean up quickly. Marcus looked around at the gathered employees, at the security guard who had stayed quiet, at Ryan who had almost spoken, at the executives who had spent months selling him numbers while hiding the culture under marble and glass. This company did not fail because of one woman in a garage, he said. It failed because too many people learned to stay silent when something was wrong. Leonard's mouth opened. Marcus raised one hand slightly, not harshly, just enough to stop him. "No speeches." The words landed like a door closing. He turned to the older officer. "Officer, I want the report to state clearly that the vehicle was mine, the access card was mine, and no crime occurred." The officer nodded. "Yes, sir. And I wanted to state that the call was made before I was asked for identification." Claire lowered her head then. Not dramatically, not for sympathy, just enough to show that the truth had finally found a place to land. The rain outside softened, tapping the ramp in slow, uneven beats. Marcus placed the acquisition page back into the leather folder and closed it. The sound of paper sliding against leather was almost gentle. "I came here today to learn what kind of company I bought," he said. "Thank you for showing me." No one dared to respond. Then Marcus picked up his coffee bag from the car roof, opened the driver's door, and removed the small silver pin from the passenger seat. He held it in his palm for a breath, remembering the man who had taught him to respect the ground beneath his feet. When he turned back toward the elevator, every person in the garage made space without being told. Claire remained by the pillar, still and pale, while Marcus Bennett walked past her toward the top floor that had been waiting for him all along. The elevator doors closed behind Marcus with a soft metallic sigh, and for the first time that morning, no one followed him with words. Leonard Price stood beside him, pale and silent. Dana Morales held her legal folder against her chest, as though paper could steady the room. Thomas Greer stared at the floor numbers climbing from level B2 to the executive floor, each red digit appearing and disappearing like a warning light. Marcus did not speak. He stood in the back corner of the elevator with the leather folder under one arm, the small silver pin resting in his palm, and the coffee bag hanging from 2 fingers. The heat from the biscuit had faded. The cup had gone cold. He could still smell rain on the officers' jackets, wet concrete from the garage, and the faint leather scent from the Rolls-Royce. More than that, he could still feel the sentence Claire had spoken. You did not look like someone who owned it. It had not surprised him. That was the part that hurt in a place too old for anger. The elevator rose past the lobby, past the accounting floor, past the sales department where people were probably refreshing emails and pretending not to hear whispers spreading through the building. Marcus watched his reflection in the polished wall. The suit executives had expected was not there. The ceremonial arrival was not there. Only a black man in a dark jacket, short curls neatly cut, eyes steady because he had learned long ago that trembling only made people think their fear had been justified. When the doors opened on the 32nd floor, the conference room ahead was ready for a celebration. A long walnut table had been set with glass water bottles, silver trays of pastries, linen napkins, and name cards printed in dark blue ink. At the head of the table, one card read Marcus Bennett, Chairman. The letters looked almost too clean, too innocent for what had just happened below. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, rain slid down the glass in thin, trembling lines, blurring the city into gray towers and moving headlights. Marcus walked to the window instead of the chair. The others waited near the door, unsure whether they had permission to sit. He looked down through the rain toward the garage ramp far below. He could not see Claire from this height, but he imagined her still standing near the pillar, holding the weight of her own words. He did not enjoy that image. That surprised him less than it might have surprised others. Revenge had always looked small to Marcus, too small for what his parents had survived, too small for the dreams they had carried on tired backs. His father used to say that bitterness was a room with no windows, and Marcus had spent too much of his life building doors to lock himself inside one. He placed the silver pen on the table. It clicked gently against the wood. Everyone heard it. Leonard cleared his throat. Mr. Bennett, we can reschedule the welcome meeting if you need time. Marcus turned from the window. Time for what? Leonard blinked. To process what happened. Marcus looked at the pastries, the bottled water, the perfect name cards, the polished table prepared for a man the garage had refused to recognize. I have been processing this my whole life, he said. The room went quiet. Not corporate quiet. Human quiet. Dana lowered her eyes. Thomas swallowed. Marcus pulled out the chair at the head of the table, but did not sit. His fingers rested on the back of it, feeling the smooth varnished wood beneath his skin. He thought of his mother outside that Chicago hotel, looking at a car she believed represented a world too guarded to welcome her son. He thought of his father's cracked hands wrapped around a steering wheel after 12 hours on the road. He thought of all the workers downstairs who wore badges but not power, who understood exactly what had happened and still had to clock in by 9. Before we discuss profits, routes, contracts, or restructuring, Marcus said, we are going to discuss who gets treated like they belong here. No one argued. The rain tapped the glass softly, almost like a clock. Marcus finally sat, not as a man taking revenge, but as one accepting responsibility. In the silence that followed, the city outside disappeared behind water, and the room felt less like a throne room than a place where something difficult and necessary was about to begin. Marcus let the silence sit long enough for everyone at the table to understand that this meeting would not begin with quarterly numbers. Leonard Price sat to his left with both hands folded too neatly, the way men folded them when they wanted to look calm, but were counting exits in their mind. Dana Morales opened her legal folder, then closed it again when Marcus did not look at the paperwork. Thomas Greer kept his eyes on the silver pen near Marcus's hand, as if that small object carried more authority than the documents waiting in front of them. Outside, rain blurred the city into soft gray shapes. Inside, every light in the conference room reflected off the walnut table with a brightness that felt almost surgical. Marcus looked from one face to another. "I want the garage security footage brought up on that screen," he said. Leonard shifted. "Mr. Bennett, I am not sure that is necessary for the ownership transition." Marcus turned toward him. "It is necessary for the company transition." Dana reached for the conference tablet and made the call. No one spoke while they waited. The only sound was rain against glass and the faint hum of climate control moving through the vents. 2 minutes later, the large screen on the wall flickered to life. The garage appeared from a high corner angle, cold and colorless. There was the Rolls-Royce beneath the executive sign. There was Marcus walking toward it with a coffee bag in one hand. There was Claire stepping into frame, her phone already raised before he had finished turning around. The room washed without sound at first. Somehow that made it worse. Without voices, the body language had nowhere to hide. Claire's distance, Marcus's stillness, the employees stopping to watch, the guard remaining near the stairwell, Ryan shifting near the elevator, caught between fear and truth. Dana added audio. Claire's voice filled the conference room, thinner through the speaker, but clear enough to cut. "He does not look like someone who owns it." Thomas looked down. Leonard closed his eyes for half a second. Dana's face tightened, not from surprise, but from recognition. Marcus did not watch Claire on the screen. He watched the executives watching her. That was where the truth was larger. "How many times has something like this happened here?" he asked. No one answered. Marcus looked at Dana. She hesitated, then opened her folder with slower hands. "There have been complaints," she said carefully. Leonard turned toward her. "Dana." She did not stop. 3 from delivery contractors, 2 from night cleaning staff, 1 from a black regional driver who said he was repeatedly asked for identification after entering with a company badge. They were marked as misunderstandings. The words seemed to fall onto the table and break open. Misunderstandings. Marcus had heard that word his whole life. It was the soft blanket people threw over hard things so they would not have to name them. He leaned back, eyes steady. "And who reviewed those complaints?" Dana looked toward Leonard. Leonard's face had gone still. "Operations and security," she said. Final review went through Miss Whitmore's department. The rain outside grew heavier for a moment, tapping the window in 1,000 small knocks. Marcus looked at the screen again. Claire was frozen there in the frame, one hand lifted, phone to her ear, certainty written across her body before evidence had entered the room. It would have been easy to make her the whole problem. The room wanted that. Marcus could feel it. One person was easier than a culture. One apology was cheaper than reform. He reached forward and paused the footage at the moment Ryan almost stepped forward. "This young man knew something," Marcus said. He almost spoke. Leonard nodded quickly, eager for a safer subject. Ryan should have reported what he knew immediately. Marcus turned his eyes on him. "No, you should have built a place where telling the truth did not feel dangerous." Leonard's mouth closed. Dana exhaled softly. The sentence moved through the room, touching everyone who had ever stayed quiet because a paycheck depended on silence. Marcus picked up the silver pen and turned it once between his fingers. "My father drove freight for 20 years, he said. He entered buildings through loading docks, side doors, rain, heat, and snow. He had paperwork in order and still got treated like a problem to be managed. My mother cleaned offices where people looked through her until they needed something wiped down. This company moves goods across America because people like them show up before sunrise and after midnight. If they are invisible here, then this company is blind." No one interrupted him. The screen glowed behind him with the frozen image of the garage, the car, the accusation, the witnesses. Marcus set the pen down. "Bring Claire Whitmore upstairs," he said. "Bring Ryan too. Not for punishment. For truth." Leonard nodded, but his face showed he did not fully understand the difference yet. Marcus looked out through the rain at the city below, calm returning to his voice. "Ownership changed last night," he said. "But today, this company either changes its soul, or it stays exactly what it was when I found it downstairs." The room remained silent. This time, the silence did not protect anyone. It waited. Claire Whitmore entered the conference room as if the floor had become thinner beneath her feet. Ryan followed 2 steps behind, his face pale, his badge turned backward from the nervous way he had been holding it in the elevator. The screen on the wall still showed the frozen image from the garage, Marcus beside the Rolls-Royce, Claire with the phone in her hand, the employees caught between witnessing and silence. The room felt colder now, not because of the air conditioning, but because truth had a way of lowering the temperature before it warmed anything. Marcus did not stand when they entered. He remained at the head of the table with the silver pen resting near his right hand and the acquisition folder closed in front of him. Claire looked at the screen once, then looked away. The woman who had spoken so sharply downstairs now seemed to be searching for somewhere to place her eyes where they would not meet what she had done. Leonard gestured toward an empty chair. But Marcus spoke before anyone. Saturday, Miss Whitmore, I did not ask you here to be embarrassed. Claire swallowed. Her voice came out small. I already am. The honesty surprised the room. It surprised her too. Marcus watched her carefully, not with softness yet, but without cruelty. Good, he said. Embarrassment can become a doorway if you do not turn it into a wall. Claire pressed her lips together, and for a moment the only sound was rain sliding down the windows. I was wrong, she said. The words were thin at first, but she did not hide behind them. She took a breath and tried again. I was wrong before the police arrived. I was wrong before I knew your name. I saw your race, your clothes, and that car, and I made a story in my head that protected my comfort instead of the truth. Ryan stared at the table. Dana lowered her folder slowly. Leonard looked uncomfortable, as if a real apology had no place in a room built for polished statements. Marcus looked at Ryan. And you? Ryan lifted his head. I knew there was a chance you were the buyer, he said. I saw your photograph in the packet, but I was afraid to speak. I did not want to challenge Miss Whitmore in front of everyone. I thought maybe I was wrong. I thought staying quiet was safer. His voice shook on the last word. Claire turned toward him, and pain crossed her face in a cleaner way than shame had. She was seeing not only what she had done to Marcus, but what her authority had taught others to fear. I am sorry, Ryan, she said quietly. I did that too. Marcus let the apology settle. He knew the room wanted a sentence, a firing, a clean symbolic punishment that would let everyone leave believing the problem had been removed. But one ruined morning did not grow from nowhere. It grew from policies that sounded neutral, from training that never touched the heart, from managers who mistook suspicion for diligence, from employees who learned to swallow truth to keep a paycheck. He opened the folder in front of him and removed a blank sheet of company letterhead. Here is what happens next, he said. The police report will be corrected. The internal incident report will include the full facts. Every prior complaint about discriminatory treatment will be reopened by an outside firm, not by this department. Security and operations will be retrained. Contractors, drivers, cleaners, visitors, and executives will all be treated under one standard. No one in this building will have to prove their humanity before being asked their name. Claire closed her eyes for a second. When she opened them, they were wet but steady. Do you want my resignation? She asked. Leonard glanced at Marcus quickly, almost hopeful. Marcus saw that too. No, Marcus said. The answer landed harder than a dismissal. Claire stared at him. Why not? Marcus leaned back slightly. Because losing your job today might make you feel punished. Staying and helping repair what you helped expose might make you useful. The room went still. Claire nodded once, slowly, as if accepting something heavier than consequence. Then I will do it, she said. Not for appearance. Not because legal tells me to. I will do it because I need to become someone who would never make that call again. Marcus studied her face and found no performance there, only a woman standing in the wreckage of her certainty. He picked up the silver pen and signed the bottom of the letterhead, authorizing the review. Then he slid the page to Dana. Start today. Dana nodded. Ryan exhaled like he had been holding his breath since the garage. Claire looked at Marcus, her voice almost a whisper. I am sorry, Mr. Bennett. Marcus stood then, and every person in the room stood with him. He did not offer her forgiveness like a gift to make the moment easier. He offered something more difficult. Then make the apology visible, he said. Not to me. To the next person who walks through our doors and expects to be treated like they belong. Claire lowered her head, not in defeat, but in understanding. Outside, the rain began to lighten against the glass, and for the first time that morning, The conference room felt less like a place where power was guarded and more like a place where it could be corrected. By late afternoon, the rain had stopped, but the windows of Whitmore Logistics still carried thin silver trails where the storm had passed. The city below looked rinsed and quieter, its streets shining under a pale break of sun. Marcus Bennett stood alone in the 32nd floor conference room after the others had gone, his hand resting on the back of the chairman's chair he had not rushed to claim. The pastries were untouched. The water bottles had gone warm. On the wall screen, the garage footage had been replaced by a plain company document titled Workplace Dignity Review, and beneath it, Dana Morales had already added the first steps in clean black type. Reopen prior complaints. Create outside reporting channel. Retrain security and operations. Protect employees who speak up. The words were simple, almost ordinary, but Marcus knew ordinary words could become powerful when a company finally meant them. He picked up the small silver pin from the table and turned it once in his hand. His father had carried that pin in the glove compartment of an old freight truck, using it to sign delivery slips in warehouses where men rarely looked him in the eye. Now it lay in Marcus's palm at the head of a company that moved freight across the country. The distance between those two images was not measured in miles. It was measured in doors opened, swallowed insults, unpaid overtime, quiet faith, and the stubborn refusal to become what the world expected. Downstairs, Claire Whitmore stood in the lobby beside Ryan and a facilities supervisor while a new temporary notice was placed near the security desk. It was not fancy, just white paper in a clear frame. All visitors, employees, contractors, drivers, and guests will be treated with respect. Identification may be requested by policy, never by assumption. Concerns may be reported without retaliation. Claire read it 3 times before she stopped seeing words and started seeing faces. The courier she once made wait outside in the cold because his badge looked worn. The night cleaner she corrected for using the main elevator with a supply cart. The driver from Birmingham who had filed a complaint and never received a real answer. Marcus, standing beside his own car, asking what made her decide he did not belong. Her apology had not erased any of it. That was the hardest mercy of the day. He had not destroyed her, but he had not let her hide. Ryan glanced at her, then at the sign. "I should have spoken sooner," he said. Claire looked at him without the sharpness he had learned to expect. "I should have made it safe for you to speak," she answered. It was not dramatic. No one clapped. No one filmed. The lobby simply continued around them. Shoes crossing marble, elevator doors opening, a delivery driver entering with a handheld scanner, and rain still darkening the shoulders of his jacket. This time, security looked up and said, "Good afternoon, sir. How can I help you?" The driver blinked, as if kindness had arrived from an unexpected direction, then gave his name. Claire watched the small exchange with a tightness in her throat. Change did not always arrive as thunder. Sometimes it arrived as a sentence said correctly to the next person. Near sunset, Marcus took the elevator back down alone. When the doors opened to level B2, the garage was almost empty. The Rolls-Royce waited beneath the executive sign, its black paint reflecting the warmer light spilling from the ramp. The morning crowd was gone. The officers were gone. The whispers had moved upward into policy, email, memory, and consequence. Marcus walked slowly to the car, opened the door, and paused before getting in. Across the garage, Claire stood near the pillar where she had first made the call. She did not approach quickly. She did not ask for comfort. She only held the new training folder against her chest and looked at him with the humbled stillness of someone who finally understood that dignity was not something she had the right to grant. Marcus gave her a small nod. Not forgiveness wrapped in ceremony. Not approval. Just recognition that the work had begun. Claire nodded back, her eyes wet but steady. Marcus sat behind the wheel and placed the silver pin on the passenger seat beside the acquisition folder. For a moment, he did not start the engine. He looked through the windshield at the garage lights, the clean concrete, the executive elevator, the sign above the space, and his own reflection in the glass. A black man, a company owner, a son of freight workers, a man who had been questioned at the door and still chose to build a wider one. Then he pressed the start button. The engine came alive softly, almost respectfully. As he drove up the ramp,